So before we start, I just want to introduce myself. I'm Jonah. I'm the Executive Director of Economy. Yeah, like I was saying, I want to welcome everybody, whether you've worked with us for years or have just heard about us last week. Welcome. Thank you for taking the time to join us. We know life is busy, and so it's really appreciated that you're here today because you connect with some element of this work. We would like to ask people to just check that your Zoom name is right for you. It's how you'd like us to refer to you. If it's not right, you can change it by hovering over yourself, and then there'll be some dots and you can click on those and click on the rename button, and you can change your name. You can also add an organization if you're joining from an organization. If you'd like to add your pronouns, she, he, they, to help others, that would be great. A few bits of housekeeping. We've got a large group here today, so the default is to have everybody muted. But then in breakout groups later, we'll have lots of chance for smaller group discussions. If you have any technical issues, you can't hear, you get, whatever it is, just write in the chat, and the economy team will do our best to help you. If you need captions, you can do that on Zoom. The more button at the bottom right, you can click on that, click on the captions button, and then click show captions. Again, if you need any help with that, just put in the chat. We're recording the session. If you do use social media, then we have a hashtag. It's People's Economy. It's on that slide you can see. Today, in the next hour and 20 minutes, we've got an agenda. We're going to start off with a bit of background, how we got here. We're going to share Economy's new 5-year strategy. We're going to hear from 3 amazing people who we've worked with over the last few years. Then we're going to go into breakout groups, which will be on different themes. You'll be able to choose what breakout group you want to go to. We'll have some discussions. We'll come back as a bigger group, and then we'll wrap up. But I think we want to be clear that this is just the start. So what we hope is that this is a place for us to connect with you, for you to connect with each other, and then to go forward and work together in various different ways. So that's very much the intention. There's a sketch artist sketching the event, so you can sign up to the newsletter, which the link to that is in the chat, if you'd like to see the outcome of that sketch of this session. We'll also be taking screenshots just to kind of capture this really lovely event. So one more thing is to remind people that we do have a social this evening at Finsbury Park Park Theatre Bar at 6:30. We wanted this main event to be online because we know we've got people from across the UK joining us, from Wales, from Belfast, from Manchester, from Sheffield. And so we wanted to make sure that it was accessible and we could all come together. But if you can join us for an in-person social tonight, that'd be great. We'll be on the first floor by the windows in the Park Theatre Bar. It's an accessible venue, so there's a lift. Nearly there, nearly on to the kind of start proper. But I think one more thing to say is that we'd like to ask everybody here to share with us the responsibility for making this session one that everybody has a positive experience of. So we've shared some ways that we'd like to all commit to relating with each other today in this session. They're on that slide now, and we'll come back to them again before the breakout rooms. So I think that's everything. And yeah, just to say thank you again, and to introduce you to Fatima, who is our program director.
Hi everyone, so lovely to see you all today. We're going to get into the meat of it now, and me and Jonah are going to be sharing a bit about our journey to here, about our new 5-year strategy, and we would love for you guys to pop questions, thoughts in the chat as we go along, and one of our breakout rooms after will be a dedicated space for questions and answers with Jonah and one of our trustees, Mina. So without further ado, let's get into it.
Great. So I think we wanted to start by situating our work in the wider context. It feels meaningful that we're all here today and we're launching this new strategy as 500,000 teachers, bus drivers, university lecturers, rail staff, civil servants, security guards across the UK are all going out on strike. Striking is a way for workers who might not have power individually to come together collectively to influence employers and governments and to secure what they need to live well. And that kind of collective coming together really captures lots of what economy's work is about. It also feels meaningful that we're here today in the context of a cost of living crisis. Communities across the UK are facing escalating housing, food and energy insecurity. Literally more and more people are struggling to keep their heads above the water, and the background of the climate crisis means that the water levels are rising. And all of this highlights the urgent and the deep work we need to do to transform our economic systems, which are a root cause of many of these challenges and injustices. Right now, economies are failing to meet the needs of people and instead kind of creating and leading to harm on a large scale. They're reproducing and often worsening harmful inequalities between people and directly driving the destruction of the planet. So the choice isn't between change and no change. Our economies are always changing. The choice is who will get to shape these changes and what they will mean for all of us. And that's why it matters that only 1 in 5 people in the UK feel able to influence decisions that affect their lives. Money, government, business, a rigged system, graphs, fear, inevitability. These are the kind of words that people tell us when we ask them, what does the economy mean? How do you feel when you hear the word economy? And the overriding sensation behind all of that is separation and powerlessness. And for us, this is all about power. It's about who makes decisions, who controls resources, who sets the goals, decides what good looks like, who writes the rules, who can participate and who can make their voice heard.
Back in 2016, economy set out to advance education and economics for public benefit. And we've had so many highlights along the way. Our engaging, accessible news on ecnmy.org has been helping shift how journalists and economists communicate on the economy. We've had the privilege of working with 120 wonderful co-producers for our Voices of the Economy series that is trying to diversify who has a public voice on the economy. We've worked with the Bank of England, the Welsh Government and different campaign groups to explore how they can better engage communities in their work. And we have our bread and butter. We've run courses and workshops for over 1,000 people across the UK that have explored everything from why is housing so expensive, what even is community wealth building, so many different topics that we've explored. And throughout all of this work, we have moved increasingly towards feeling this deep sense of optimism about the possibility to transform our economies through the collective power of communities. Because ultimately the economy is a shorthand for the systems through which the resources that we all need to live are produced, distributed and consumed. And we know that so many of the essential goods and services, from housing to healthcare, social care to sports centres, are all mediated through them. And when we think about the economy in this way, we know it's not separate from ourselves. It's part of communities, it's part of society, it's part of the environment. All of us here today are part of it every day. And because of that, because it's something we're part of, it's something that we can influence. But importantly, because the economy dictates who gets power and resources, it also means we can't really meaningfully solve any of our other problems until we change the economic system that we live in. And so all this journey, these thoughts, these questions along the way has led us to design this new strategy that tried to answer a fundamental question and figure out a role in it all. How can communities facing economic injustice across the UK work to build collective power to transform the economy?
Over the last year, we've conducted research and we've had kind of strategy sessions. You can see on the slide a picture of one of those held on Zoom around this time last year with people who've been part of our work, community partners, friends, funders, fellow travellers, and we've attempted to answer this question. Along the way, loads of other questions came up, and we've tried to answer those too. And the thing I think that came out of all of those was a need to come together to create the spaces and to provide the resources that communities can come together and develop that shared understanding of how economies currently work, how they currently relate to the kind of issues that matter, to the challenges people face, and then also how they can be different, how they can be fairer, how they can be more sustainable, because at the moment those spaces don't exist. And this has shaped a kind of an updated vision for our work and an updated mission. Our vision now is a democratic, equitable and livable economy where communities can meet their needs and priorities. And then the way that we'll contribute to that is by working with communities experiencing injustice to reimagine, rebalance and transform the economy. And the ways that we do this are through direct support for change makers, community education, and shaping the wider movement conditions for this work to be effective. And we'll talk a bit more about how we do those things. So the people that we want to work with are the people all over the UK every day, hundreds of thousands of them who are working to change things and to keep themselves and their communities afloat. We're talking about parents, young people, youth workers, faith groups, community organisers, care workers, migrants, small business owners, union members, refugees, mutual aid groups, all of these different people who are on the front line dealing with the harms that the economy is currently creating. And they're not always consciously connecting this work to the underlying economic system for loads of reasons. It might be because the economy is this thing that can't be changed. It might be because there's just not the time or the resources, or because, you know, the economy is not for people like me, it's for white men in suits on the news, or people from London. Or it might just be because you feel isolated. But despite these barriers and that kind of lead to the connections aren't made, often and in many ways, all of these people are doing the work to organize things differently. And that is changing the economy. And our strategy sees this, and it asks how we build power together by making these links conscious, by communicating it to others, by connecting with others who are doing similar work, and then by figuring out how we can turn that into larger changes. And we just see that energy and potential. It's already there. Ideas, knowledge, relationships, all of the energy for economic transformation exist. They're born out of necessity, out of the creativity, out of the knowledge that people have what's going wrong and how it can be changed.
So over the next 5 years, we're planning 3 strands of work. And the first one focuses on building deep, long-term relationships with change makers who are working within communities facing economic injustice. So this work is about supporting more of them to connect their work to the economy. It's about how we can create space for people to imagine, understand and plan the kind of economic change they want to see, and how we could facilitate in-depth learning journeys that enables this to happen. It's also about connecting, helping to connect more people who can support each other's work, and reinforce the change work that's happening through communities of practice and through setting up alliances that support change makers, community organisations and civil society organisations to better connect on economic change work. The foundation for this first strands work is all in our approach to community education on the economy, which is something we've been developing really over the last 7 years. Our approach really takes a supportive approach, going through a learning process to build practical knowledge, skills and confidence around the economy, and considering the way it underpins the most pressing social issues that people are facing. And for us, it's about working with people to support them to develop their own analysis on what the root causes and solutions are to the issues that they're seeing every day in their communities and the issues that they're trying to create change on. In 5 years' time, we aim to have worked with 10,000 people in communities across the UK to connect what matters to them to the need for economic system change. What we really hope is that all of this work and the scale of this work can help to shift the widespread belief that the economy is something that can only be shaped by government, big business, or the very wealthy, and that we can at least be starting to demonstrate that when communities experiencing injustice come together, they have the power to understand, reimagine and rebalance the dysfunctional economic systems we've been talking about. We plan to start with a focus in Birmingham, Wales and London, and that's because it would be building on our existing work and partnerships in these areas, which includes the support we're providing at the moment to set up a Community Economic Justice Alliance in Birmingham, and the amazing 10-month journey we're currently on with change makers and residents across the city who are looking at how power and resources in Birmingham can be rebalanced. And over the next 5 years, we're planning to expand our work to new regions and to do more work nationally.
So that's strand one, and that's where we're starting, and we definitely feel that that's the kind of core of our work. Strand two is to sit around and to support that work. It's about creating routes for communities to be able to take part in different kinds of economic change work, whether that's building alternatives, practical alternatives in their community, whether that's campaigning, whether that's shifting narratives in the media, and also then removing the barriers that we know people face, whether that's confidence or whether that's resources, or whether that's connections and networks. We've decided to focus on 3 key spaces in which the future of our economies are decided. So those spaces are new economy organizations and campaigns because of the role they play in developing and pushing for alternatives, local and national government decision making, which is obvious because they're the spaces in which budgets are set, taxes, spending, policies, regulations, which have such a vital role in shaping how our economies are structured, and also the media because of the role it plays in shaping public narratives and attitudes about our economies. And in each of these spaces, we'll work with the change makers that we work with in the regions that we're working in, to try to kind of develop practice that enables more people to access and influence those spaces. So, for example, the BBC on Monday came out with a big report on their reporting on the economy, and one of their findings was that they weren't interviewing a wide enough range of people in the economy, and this is a key, opening under the Strand 2 work where we and partners would would engage the BBC and seek to kind of open up who they interview and who they see as credible in the economy, and that's a really good example, I think, of the work we'd like to do under this strand. The third strand, and the last but definitely not least, it's an internal focus. It's about having the infrastructure we need to deliver this work really well, but also in full alignment with our values and the way we want the world to change. Two priority areas for us, which we're sharing today because we want to be accountable on, our governance, and on governance we're committed to building a more participatory approach that will make economy more accessible and inclusive and accountable to the communities that we work with. And our aim ultimately is to become an organisation that is run by and for communities facing injustice. And we know that requires deep cultural and organisational shifts. And we will do that and explore how to do that over the next 5 years. The second is on diversity, inclusion and anti-oppression. This area of work is about the changes we can make internally across the staff team, leadership of the organisation, the board, how we work, who we partner with, how we're funded. And this has been a huge part of my journey, my learning journey. I started off this work thinking we've got to change out there, and have over time realized that the changes that we make to the things we control, the organizations we're in, and our own professional practice are as important. And so this is reflected in the strategy, and we're sharing these now with the kind of acknowledgement that we don't know the answers, and that we will make mistakes along the way, but we want to do that kind of in an open and accountable way, and share those with you as we go.
Thanks, Joe. So all of that kind of strategy, that the strands that we've outlined contribute to our theory of change, and we don't have loads of time to go into the detail of it today, but we would after today we're going to email you a summary of our strategy, and so you can dive into the detail there, and obviously we hope to have lots more chats with so many of you. And now I think we said in the description that there was a surprise or a bit of announcement that we had to share with you all. And so as our work has evolved, people and communities have remained so central to our strategy and our vision. And all of this evolution under the new strategy prompted us to reflect on our goals and our theory of change, on our internal practices, but also on our public brand. We're excited to share with you today a new name for the organisation, People's Economy. The move from economy to people's economy is about making the goals that we have transparent. For us, it reflects not just what we're trying to work towards, but how we plan to get there, by building power and agency and vision with community and change makers across the UK. And during the strategy process, we asked some people what they felt or what they thought when they heard People's Economy. And these are just some of the answers that for us really resonated with our mission. Amazing. So this is the first time we've shared the change publicly, and we wanted to do it first with so many of you who've been part of our journey so far. And over the coming weeks, you will see us make the kind of switch more publicly in this rollout across our channels and work as well. I am going to stop sharing now because we're coming to a close with the presentation.
I think we are going to go over now to our Associate Director for Training, Claire, who will introduce our speakers.
Great, thank you, Jonah. So yeah, now you've heard a little bit about our strategy. Soon you'll be going into breakout rooms, they'll have different themes, and you'll be able to choose which room you go into. But before that, we're going to hear from a few different people who have worked with us on different programmes through recent months, just to hear a little bit about the value that they see in economy's work, soon to be people's economy, and also to get some tips and advice given their experience on how we can implement our strategy best, how we can reach the people we want to reach and have a really great impact. So that should be all four of us spotlighted, and you should all be able to unmute. Whilst you're testing that, I'm just going to briefly introduce you and say welcome to Franklyn, Mona and Sim. Unable to unmute, or could one of you? Yeah, you're fine. Okay, brilliant. So I'm not going to speak too much about our wonderful speakers, because they're going to explain to you how they've been, what they've been doing in terms of working with economy. But we have Franklyn Addo, who's a London-based youth worker, community activist and writer. Simin Wadawala, who is on our community ambassador board, and Mona Bani, who's the managing director at Revoke, a grassroots organisation advocating for the rights and welfare of underserved young people, particularly refugees, asylum seekers, those in the care system, living without advocates, families, power or a voice. I think I'm going to start, if it's okay. We're going to have it's a semi-structured conversation, so we're going to hear from each of the speakers and have a bit of a conversation. I'm going to start with Franklyn. Franklyn, how have you been involved in economy, and what have you seen has been the value of the work that that you've been working on with economy?
Yeah, hello everyone. My name's Franklyn. I was introduced to the work of economy through a North London organisation called Art Against Knives that I'm a charity of. And economy's work inspired me particularly because I'm from a London borough called Hackney, was born and raised here and have witnessed it evolve quite rapidly, have seen gentrification here, have seen the displacement of long-time local residents. And so I felt like I had a particular stake in increasing participation in the local economy. And so I was part of a 3-month research project with economy, helping to facilitate conversations with young people in the London borough of Newham, which is adjacent to Hackney, about how the economy can work better for them. Newham is trialing a radical approach called community wealth building, which seeks to help keep money in the local economy and prioritize the concerns of local residents. And this project involved us having weekly conversations with the young participants. We spoke about issues like the widening wealth gap in Newham, things like employment and housing and the prospect of home ownership. And yeah, I think what was really valuable is that young people determined their own kind of priorities and research questions. They were remunerated for their time as well and gained valuable experience and research skills, and described this offering as like one of the better ones as part of their youth justice program. Presently, the young researchers are together with a researcher from the University of East London, analysing the output and figuring out how to collate it and feed it back to key stakeholders and decision makers like the mayor of Newham, perhaps. So yeah, that's a summary to my involvement in that project, and yeah, why I'm so passionate about economy's work, particularly engaging young people in such vital conversations.
That's amazing. Thank you, Franklyn. And yeah, we're crossing our fingers for that meeting with the mayor of Newham. It's been amazing what we've seen come out of the research, the concerns of the young people. Let's move on to Sim. Sim, thanks so much for joining us. Yeah, could you give us a brief rundown as well? How have you been involved in economy, and what's the value you've seen?
Hi, thanks, Claire. Can you hear me all right? Cool, yeah. Hi everyone, it's really nice to be here and be in this space. My name's Sim, I'm based in Brighton, and I first got involved through Economy, doing a co-production video that we kind of worked on together. I hadn't really tried to do any media or content creation before then, so that was really new for me. But it was about co-ops, housing co-ops, a different way of owning and living in housing. So through my involvement in my housing co-op and the network that I'm part of, Radical Roots, we got together and did this co-production, and soon after that I applied to be on the community ambassador board of Economy, which is it's like a committee that sits alongside the staff and the trustees, but we meet every month. It's a paid role, 5 months an hour, 5 hours a month, and we work together on Economy's governance, I guess, and strategy is something that we've been doing the last year. I see it as a way of Economy kind of freeing up capacity of change makers across the country. There's 8 of us, 7 of us, and it's a way for us to not only make an affect the economy in our kind of local environments or in our campaigning, but also then be able to feed back into the organisation economy, people's economy, in a way that, you know, feels participatory and like we get to know the organisation over time. So yeah, that's my involvement with Economy, Claire.
Thanks so much, Sim. So yeah, quite different interactions with Economy. They're a really on the ground youth project, and then Sim's part of this group that is helping us alongside our board of trustees to with our governance, and has really fed into the strategy that you've just heard about. Actually, Sim and colleagues have been really involved in that. And Mona, finally, welcome.
You want me to just kick off?
Yes, please. Yeah. How have you been involved with our work, and yeah, why are you still involved?
Yeah, so we've been involved for probably a bit over a year and a half, and Claire reached out to me, I think, when you were sort of looking to engage more grassroots projects, and as we support mostly young refugees and asylum seekers who've mostly arrived unaccompanied. So even if they're now not minors anymore, they might be over 18, they nonetheless are here without like a family network, and they're quite often still care leavers, or they live in sort of home office accommodation, local authority kind of provided accommodation, and obviously are learning a lot about just this country, the systems here, their rights, etc. And they need a lot of like advocating for that. So clearly, like, Economy is massively like relevant to their lives, mainly that they don't have much of it, and they often, you know, don't have access to get it, and are very dependent on other sources for that. So a big part of what we do at Revoke is to build the kinds of partnerships that would allow us to advocate more broadly than we can on our own as a small organization. So we do focus quite a lot on, we have a political education program, and we focus quite a lot on essentially like actually providing the knowledge and the skills and the platforms for the young people to kind of collectively like advocate for themselves and their own rights as a community of people. So working with Economy kind of has really just allowed us to do that. So they've been very good at channeling opportunities our way, essentially. So some of our young people got paid for their time to write articles about what it means to be seeking asylum in the UK or being a refugee here. 2 of our young people sit on the same community ambassador board as Sim does. So now they're literally shaping Economy strategy and maybe giving more of a voice to what it means to be someone seeking asylum or being of refugee status in the UK. And Economy have been like incredibly like flexible in order to kind of like adapting some of your own working practices and actually kind of understanding more from us on what it even means to work with that demographic, what the barriers to entry into projects like this might be for them. So yeah, it's just basically given us a lot of platforms and access to provide some of that like political education, I guess.
That's amazing to hear. And yeah, I can see some parallels between the different projects, and one of them being the support that we've given to you, Sim, and people at Revoke, Mona, for example, to have their voices heard in terms of helping to co-produce articles that that we've published ourselves and sometimes got placed in other places, and we're hoping to do that with the young people in Newham actually as well. The results of the research into how young people want the community wealth building project in Newham to go, they're just being synthesized at the moment, and we're hoping to be able to put those results in front of the mayor, but also to support the young people to write up as well, hopefully, the results of that. Just bearing in mind, just reminding you all, we've just got a few more minutes left, so if you could try to keep your contributions as brief as concise as possible. I just wanted to ask you, you know, you've all worked with different groups, diverse groups and grassroots groups that Economy's been working with, and from working with us and your own work, what might you, we'd like to hear from you what your advice would be in terms of how we should best engage and reach out to groups, because that's a key part of our strategy. So I'll start with Sim, if that's all right.
Yeah, sure, thanks. I think it's a really lovely question, which, like, yeah, it kind of comes down to how do you build trust and connection. Something I've really valued with the Community Ambassador Board is kind of this ongoing developing relationship, right? So the fact that we are, in a sense, you know, change makers to start with, like, that's just who we are, but then also we're like, we have this kind of position within the organization, right? The idea of not taking anything for granted, not taking knowledge for granted, not making assumptions on how we can contribute, or even, I think in a sense, I think I speak for people on the panel, feel empowered going into situations where, like, I might not have otherwise, and fed into stuff that maybe I didn't think that I could. You know, it goes without saying, but paying people for their time, like, that just is almost a baseline for, like, you know, so that people have the capacity to engage in this stuff, because of the system that we live in. For so many people, it's not a choice. Yeah, and otherwise, just sort of like being caring and being trauma informed around, like, all of the ways that the different aspects of our life challenge us. I'm going on a bit, but yeah, I think acknowledging all of us as full humans, and yeah, building that trust over time.
Thanks, Sim. Yeah, I think that's really important, and it takes time, it takes resource, and like you said, being able to recompense people for their time is really key, and there's different ways of doing that. We've certainly experimented with yeah, we know that a lot of people are time poor, and you know, have many barriers to joining different types of engagement, and yeah, we've been experimenting with different ways, and any advice from people on the call, there will be an evaluation form, a feedback form at the end, where we will ask for your thoughts as well, so please do stay to the end and fill that out. Franklyn, if you could briefly, yeah, do you have
just being trauma informed, surely, creating safe environments, and acknowledging the lived realities, because what we're talking about isn't abstract, but like you say, it can be difficult for people to participate in the first instance. And the main thing for me is listening first and foremost, and amplifying voices. Yeah, every geography is different. Every demographic has its own unique challenges as well, and just listening rather than being presumptuous. For example, with the Newham project, while I relate to a lot of the discussions because I'm from Hackney, which is adjacent, I realized that, yeah, it's an entirely different geography, different time from when I was growing up. My claim to youth is rapidly expiring, so I couldn't go in imagining that I could understand completely young people's lived realities. We had to be led by them, and that's just the micro. So yeah, just tailoring and being willing to be adaptable, as Mona described, is, yeah, I think the bit of advice I'd give.
Yeah, listening, absolutely key. And I loved your claim to youth is rapidly expiring. I can relate. Moving on to you, Mona.
Yeah, I think one thing you seem to have done really well is to go to organizations that already seem to have built a lot of that trust and have that track record, and actually possibly starting the conversation there and building that trust, which might be, and then actually letting them do some of that intermediary work for you, which I think in our case has worked well, and the young people might trust our recommendation more. And then any conversations that we might need to have around, well, you might actually need to change it this way, or actually we have to have interpreters there, or yeah, the young people need to be paid, but it needs to be in this way because of their status or whatever. There's been a lot of willingness to adapt around that. And I actually think then the young people will also see that and recognize that they're being treated differently to what they might be in other spaces. I think you've made a lot of effort to engage with our work more broadly. So you don't just engage with us for the bits that maybe specifically concern you, but Jonah has kind of attended quite a few of our events and our activities. And I think that really shows everyone involved that you care and you want to just build relationships and build community. So I feel really, actually, I think you're probably on the right track. I don't think I have a lot more to add.
Thanks so much. That's really helpful, Mona. And yeah, working in partnership is really key to our model. And we've always done that right from the beginning when we started our crash courses, for those of you that have been with us since then, across Manchester, London and Scotland, making partnerships with groups with existing communities. And that's really key to our model. Fabulous. So we're going to wrap up in a second, and before we leave, I just wanted to ask each of you, in a dream world, what impact would you like to see, will be people's economy then, people's economy make in 5 years? What would success look like to you? It's a hard question. Yeah, in a nutshell, very briefly, what impact would you like us to see in 5 years? And it's great that we're seeing some people write their answers in the chat as well. That's brilliant. If anyone else wants to pop it in there, we'd love to see. But let's start with Mona.
I mean, ideally in 5 years' time, I guess your work would maybe no longer be needed. That would perhaps be the absolute ultimate success. But I mean, I guess really macro, a society where actually there wouldn't have to be this kind of advocacy happening, because all communities and all groups would have equal access to an equitable economy. But I guess if I was to speak on just our remit in particular, I guess something around maybe some of the rights of asylum seekers and refugees, genuinely shifting in terms of their economic position while they're in this country, waiting at various levels of their status, and perhaps both they themselves understanding what those rights are, and actually other bodies and employers and the sector at large understanding it, because we still have a lot of people come and actually ask our advice on whether they can even employ someone with refugee status, which they completely can, but they actually just don't know that, and they think they shouldn't, that it's the same as still waiting for asylum, for example, and so on. So I think maybe something around both the groups themselves truly knowing what their rights are and how to go access them, and the sort of society at large just being a lot more informed around that, would perhaps be a more attainable goal.
Amazing, thank you, Mona. Sim?
Yeah, I definitely agree with what Mona said, and it's really nice to hear that. I suppose my answer is, earlier in the presentation we kind of talked about, I think it was Fatima who talked about economy working with 10,000 people, or will have worked with 10,000 people in 5 years' time, and I'm thinking in the context of today's strikes, and that being estimated at 500,000. I think that's amazing, and I think we should be looking at scale like that. In a dream world, Claire, I think the workshops that you do are fantastic, and I sort of wish that more people had access to going to those. And it wasn't just like folks who, I don't know, folks like us who think that they're interested in the economy. But like everybody on those strikes, I think, would benefit from these. Yeah, 500,000. That is my dream answer.
Hopefully they won't need to go on strike as well in 5 years. Hopefully they will win their demands.
Yeah.
Franklyn.
I would like to see more people from marginalized demographics, like more young people, involved in these discussions. Yeah, the Neuron Project, for young people, had very many insights to I felt that could be to like schools, other local authorities. Sorry, can you guys hear me?
I think you're back now, Franklyn. If you could.
Yeah. So just to see this work exported into other contexts and to see a wider range of people involved and engaged in the conversations. Yeah, that's what I'd like to see.
Yeah, for sure.
Amazing. Well, we're going to wrap up this section now, but thank you so much, all three of you, for joining us. Super helpful to hear your perspectives, given your experience with economy and the wider work that you're doing. So we're going to go into breakout rooms now. Thank you, Fatima, for sharing that slide. So there are 5 breakout rooms, and I will explain how you can choose which breakout room to go into. The first breakout room is going to look at, so it's an opportunity for you to share who you think we should work with and how your work might fit with others' work, how economies work might fit with your work or others' work. And the second one, I will do a very brief explanation of our approach to education, and then there'll be a space for you to talk about your thoughts on what our approach should be and perhaps what topics we should concentrate on. Then there will be the third room will be with Fatima, looking at what barriers we might face, so you can give your thoughts on that and what advice you might have for us. The fourth breakout room is a general space to ask questions about the strategy with Jonah, and the fifth one will be with my colleague Beth, who will facilitate an open space to network, chat and learn about each other's work. Welcome back, everybody. I hope you had some good conversations in your breakout rooms, and yeah, it's great to have you back. And we're just going to hear briefly from the different groups what came up. So I'm going to go to our head of community, Joe, to hear about the main points from that breakout room.
Thanks. I was just thinking you're going to come to me first, and I've got like all these different bits of work that people have just told me they were doing. So I'll try my best to summarize, but there's so much here. Lots of people talking about best ways to share practice. The idea, one person suggested a monthly meetup call to share different ways that we're doing overlapping work. We had a really important reminder not to forget about Northern Ireland, as often happens, because they've been doing interesting participatory stuff for a long time. That's from the Food Ethics Council, mentioned that. We heard from Unlimited Potential about their work co-producing with local people. Similarly, Just Space London have some really good examples of thinking about community wealth building in interesting locally rooted ways. We've got someone in Wales working on the issue of housing and how we can retain public assets and run them successfully. We had a reminder about the perspective from migrant communities and lots of learning we can do with Migrant Voice about bringing that into the conversation. Positive Money reminded us about coordinating together with different participatory processes we're doing, and sharing learning about language messaging, and different principles about how we communicate about the economy. There's so much here, but it sounds like the overarching themes are there's loads of people doing community rooted work that we can link together, learn from, and hopefully part of our strategy can be offering support to those people doing work on the ground, and then helping link up different learning from different parts of the country. So thanks so much to everyone who contributed to that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jo. That was really comprehensive. Amazing. Can we go to the barriers and advice group with Fatima?
We can. We had a lovely discussion, which I will try and sum up briefly. We started talking, Sim was in our group, so we opened with talking about this idea of reaching 500,000, but it was more generally about what are the barriers to like scaling work in a way that's sustainable, in a way that aligns with values, in a way that's getting resources to the right places. We spent quite a lot of time talking about storytelling and how we invest in telling different stories, how stories can enable people to feel change is possible when used as kind of a device effectively. We talked about how we could tell more stories about examples of change from history, tell stories that are honest about the challenges and barriers to creating economic change. And then we kind of rounded up a little bit talking about barriers, about perspectives from young people and young adults. And it was interesting, some of the kind of insights there that were shared really reflected with some of the work we've been doing in Newham, where there's like a focus on money and jobs and not wealth, the feeling of the education system feeling kind of narrowing people, their aspirations. Yeah, lots of different interesting things. And sadly, we got cut off just then. So could have spent ages more.
Amazing. Can we go to the room, which I suspect had a lot of people in it, which was general questions on strategy with Jonah?
Yeah, we were actually a nice compact group. Not that it wouldn't have been nice to have loads of people too, but we had a really good discussion about, there was a kind of question and discussion about how we relate to the new economy movement and organizations, how currently, yeah, there's a kind of who's involved, and some of the kind of language and the ways that change is brought about aren't necessarily open. We talked about how when we're kind of working with people and then suggesting routes to get involved with different campaigns, that if those campaigns or spaces aren't kind of accessible, then that's actually, it becomes a blockage or a barrier. And so trying to kind of work what practically that work would look like. We also had a really good question, I think, highlighted that our language in our strategy was around communities, but then, you know, given today there are 500,000 workers on strike, and so thinking how our work relates to workers and to unions. We talked a bit about different unions of different sizes, how some of the smaller unions are maybe doing the kind of have a kind of cultural fit with economy's work, but how we can build relationships with some of the really big unions and get to that kind of scale that Sim and Fatima have been discussing. We also talked about how relationships are key to this work, but then how, you know, but also, you know, take time and energy and resources. And so how can we build that relational approach in and resource it, and thinking around kind of all of those relationships not just being between groups and economy, but if those relationships are kind of in a web, that actually takes less resource for economy, that it's other people relating, and we're building this kind of web of relationships around the work, being a potential way forward or a way to think about it. So yeah, so I hope that feels like for our group it summed up our discussion.
Brilliant, thank you, Jonah. And Beth's group?
Yeah, so we were there just to sort of get to know each other, network and chat, which was really nice. So between us, nice small group, but we managed to span the Midlands, London and Wales, which was good. I think there was a lot of connection actually. In fact, I think everyone in that group, please correct me if I'm wrong, has been on one of Economy's courses. In either Wales or the Shift Birmingham course, which is really lovely to have that sort of connection in. And yes, we talked about economic education in the university level. And actually there was a question about whether it had changed much from when Rethinking Economics and stuff came out of it. And my guess is that not as much as perhaps other areas of the Herald have. So yeah, it was nice.
Thanks, and I should have introduced you, Beth, as our head of media as well. And thanks for that, Beth. So onto our group. So that was on the topic of what the approach and focus of our education work should centre around. And I was mostly answering questions from participants. There was a question, I think this echoed questions in the other groups, but about how our work fits with other organisations, and we were talking about how other organisations in the new economy sector might often reach out to people who are engaged in the new economy sector, and economies aiming to reach out to people who might be involved in campaigns and activism or making change, but wouldn't necessarily have engaged in work around the economy before. So for example, they might be involved in a housing campaign, but hadn't really looked at the economic causes of the housing crisis when it comes to banks and finance, for example. There was a question about whether our work needs to be practical, so people equipped with knowing the root causes of the housing crisis, but not equipped with the confidence and skills and networks to be able to use that information. That wouldn't be too useful. So I was talking about how our education approach is, we do try to include for example, exercises where people practice talking about what they've learned, and we really try to incorporate building people's confidence and skills, not just their understanding around the topics. There was a question about how to get involved if people have just heard about us and our work, and I think the best way is to fill out our feedback form at the end, which asks for your details if you'd like to, if you're interested in working with us. Yeah, I think I'll leave it there. Thanks everyone who joined my breakout room. It was a really interesting discussion. We've got a few minutes before we wrap up, in case people have final questions on the strategy that you want to pop in the chat, that Fatima and Jonah might be able to answer. So if there are any final questions from your breakout rooms or that came up during the strategy presentation, do pop them in. We've just got a couple of minutes.
If not, we could always wrap up early. I feel like to finish something 5 minutes early is an absolute miracle. So, could give everyone that time back too, which would be nice.
Absolutely. Let's give people 10 seconds to think.
Or not. We've got a good question. Fatima, do you want to? Thank you, Danny.
Happy for you to go first, Joe. Sorry, I'm just slightly trying to get my slide, but.
Yes, of course. Well, Thanks, Chris. So the question is, how do you see the strategy relating to Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, but also devolution in England? I think it's about the kind of reality of who we're engaging with. So as Fatima mentioned, our focus initially is Birmingham, Wales and London, and that's based on previous relationships and our kind of resources and capacity. But the aim then is to kind of add that to those focuses in a way that is sustainable. But then in terms of the places we are starting, you've got obviously a devolved Welsh government. In Birmingham, you've got a combined authority on top of a local authority, and so those kinds of realities influence then the way when we're working with communities who we need to be speaking to influence economic decisions and change. And I think then so that's kind of maybe the kind of strand one work. Then when it comes to kind of strand two and thinking about how government policy making can change, I think it's our connections with other organizations and groups. So I think, you know, kind of devolution of power and resources around the economy definitely aligns with what our mission is. There is a kind of We're Right Here campaign for community power that we've done bits of training for, made up of a kind of range of community organizations. And so I think it would relate in those different ways. Yeah, hopefully that helps.
Brilliant. We don't have any further questions, so yeah, Jonah, if you want to wrap up.
Yes. So to wrap up, a few reminders. I think these things were mentioned at the start. Please do sign up to the newsletter. It's a good way to keep in touch. You'll also get the kind of live sketch of this event. We will share a PDF of the kind of strategy with you all by email tomorrow morning, and it will be up on our website. Please do share that with kind of networks, anyone you think might be interested. As I think we've discussed lots today, this is all about, you know, relational work and networks and connecting. And so if you could help us spread the word, that would be appreciated. Yes, if you are in London and you would like to join us tonight, 6:30, it would be great to have you and to be able to have to continue the conversation. But if you're not, don't worry, we continue the conversation via email. We can arrange a call. We see this very much as the start or as the next chapter for us, and we're really excited to work with you all. The evaluation form is in the chat. Like, we're always, you know, keen to understand what about our events work, what doesn't. Did we spend too long on the presentation, not enough time, etc.? You know, please do tell us. It really helps us to make these things better in future. Is there anything else on kind of next steps, Claire or Fatima, that I've missed?
I don't think so. Just excited to stay in touch with so many of you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and just to say, the feedback form's also a great space just to let us know if you want to engage with us in the future, or if you've got ideas of other people that we should be engaging with.
Great. And so I think then to say some final thank yous. Thank you to Franklyn and Sim and Mona for A, just being wonderful partners, but B, for talking today. Thank you to all of the other ambassadors. A few of you are on the call. Thank you to Claire for kind of bringing this all together, to all of our trustees, and thank you to you all for giving up time in your day, for being in front of a screen. Yeah, it's great. It's really nice now that the presentation is off to see so many of your faces, and hopefully we can meet in real life at some point. So yeah, have lovely evenings, and look forward to the next chapter.